You know, it's incredible how Mark Carney and Doug Ford are handling things. And I'm not saying that it's easy to handle Trump, and I'm not saying that Trump's objections are all in good faith. I think he is perhaps overreacting, although if it's true that the government of Ontario is spending $75 million on this ad, and I find that such a staggering sum, it's almost defies belief, that would affect political campaigns in the United States. I mean, imagine if Trump spent $75 million in a Canadian political cycle. It would be considered outrageous. So maybe Trump, maybe he's not flying off the handle. Maybe it is in good faith. You dumped $75 million, as I mentioned earlier. The entire NRA ad spend in the last presidential election was just $10 million. Imagine being 7.5 times that. But what is the right approach to take? I mean, is it even possible to negotiate with Donald Trump, or do you just have to sit and take terms? I think it is possible to negotiate with him. Other countries have managed to achieve that. In fact, other countries seem to have be favorite pets of Donald Trump. I refer to Nayib Bukele of El Salvador and even Javier Milei of Argentina. Trump has gone beyond the call of duty to prop them up, to support them, to shower them with praise and actual useful things. For some reason, Mark Carney, who billed himself as the Trump whisperer, has failed. Joining me now to talk about this and to talk about how different provinces have had different tactics. We're joined by Keith Wilson, King's Counsel. We know him as a freedom lawyer from Alberta, but he's got a lot to say about Canada and Alberta too. Keith, great to see you again.
Good to be on.
You know, Danielle Smith, I think, has taken the right approach. I saw her in Washington, D.C. I was down there for Trump's inauguration, and there was Danielle Smith working the rooms, going to receptions, and she had booked a boardroom in a hotel in central D.C., and one after the other, there were all sorts of industry groups and politicians coming through, and she was selling them on Canada, not berating America, not fighting Trump, but trying to say, look, here's how we work together. It was quite something to see. I don't know if any of the other provinces did the same, but they certainly criticized Smith for being too friendly to Trump. Looks like she had the right approach all along. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong. And what's so spectacular about what's happening, particularly with what Doug Ford and the Ontario government has done to antagonize President Trump, and really insult him and offend him, is that, you know, what are we talking about here? We're talking about trade, right? Well, trade involves a seller and a buyer. It involves a customer. 75% of Ontario's trade is with one customer, the United States of America. You don't antagonize customers. You don't insult customers if you have any modicum of intelligence. That's what's so stunning here, is that 400,000 jobs in Ontario are dependent upon having a good relationship with the customer called the United States of America. And what sensible, intelligent leaders do is they don't take out ads insulting the head of the customer. They rent, as Danielle Smith did, a ballroom at a hotel, and they invite people in and they have cocktails and they get to know them and they get to understand what their needs and concerns are and how you can better meet those so you can sell more stuff to your customer.
Yeah. Hey, I want to put to you two possibilities, and if there's a third one, you tell me.
Sure.
Look, there is a permanent diplomatic corps in Washington, D.C. at our embassy. And obviously in the Department of Foreign Affairs in Ottawa, a lot of them are focused on the U.S. relationship. So there are lifelong diplomats who I would say most of them are nonpartisan. They have a lot of enduring relationships with staff and probably congressmen and senators. So you have a lot of people who could probably say, well, this is how we do it. This is how we did it under both Harper and Trudeau. Like, I truly believe that a lot of the diplomats are nonpartisan. I believe that. Maybe I'm a fool, but I think so. But it seems to me like Mark Carney and Doug Ford are completely ignoring any advice, any norms, like running a $75 million ad campaign, denouncing him as a tyrant, Doug Ford threatening to turn off electricity. So here's my two theories. Theory number one, instead of taking normal diplomatic advice from the pros, they are getting extremely bad advice from someone else who, in my opinion, maybe hates Trump and thinks that they can be the Trump buster, where no other country in the world has succeeded in doing that. So explanation number one is that this is the Canadian government and the Ontario government following really dumb advice. They mean well, but boy, are they misguided. Here's explanation number two, Keith, and you tell me what you think of this, or if there's a third explanation. Explanation two is so outrageous, part of me doesn't even want to say it, but it fits. What if Doug Ford and Mark Carney actually want a battle with Trump? Because domestically, it keeps enough people voting Liberal or for Doug Ford or whatever. In the coming recession, Ford can blame Donald Trump for all the hardship as opposed to his weak leadership these past years. Carney can say, I've always told you we have to pivot towards China. We have to decarbonize, deindustrialize. Sorry to see the... So theory one, whoa, they're getting bad advice, but they really want to help Canada. They're just doing it wrong. Theory two, they actually want Trump to punish us, to tariff us, to move the auto sector down there, to devastate our economy. The worse, the better. So they can say, Trump did this to us. Never vote for Pierre Poilievre. He's too Trump-like. Vote Mark Carney. Vote for Doug Ford, the Trump fighter. Like, theory two is that these guys are not so stupid that they realize calling Trump a tyrant will irritate them. They're not stupid. They're just too clever. What do you think of those two theories, or do you have a third theory?
Well, I have a blended theory. I think both of those things can be true at the same time. And think about this. You know, look what's happened to Venezuela. You know, second largest reserve of oil in the world, and their money became so worthless that it litters the streets. And so Chavez and then Maduro, they explain away the failures of socialism, not as the failures of socialism, but rather the oppressive and trade interference and unfair trade activities by the United States with tariffs and sanctions, right? So it provides cover for their policy failure in Venezuela. It provides cover for their ideological mess and their leadership failures. So it could be the case that Carney and Ford and Eby and others see themselves as somewhat protected by being able to blame Trump. But I also think in the first instance, this was glaring incompetence. Yeah. And a really good illustration of the incompetence is the execution. And what I mean by that is they took a 1 minute clip from President Reagan from a 5 minute and 10-second radio address. And they took a minute in the middle. And at the beginning of the address, Reagan was talking about the need to use tariffs to achieve fair trade, specifically Japanese semiconductors, because they were flooding the market. We wouldn't have a Silicon Valley today. We probably wouldn't have a Google. We wouldn't have a Meta, et cetera, had Reagan not used tariffs, significant tariffs, to curtail the flooding of semiconductors into the American market in 1987. He used tariffs, President Reagan did, on motorcycle parts. He used it on steel. He used it on grain. And then so they took the middle minute. So the first part is President Reagan talking about the importance of him having the power to impose tariffs to achieve fair trade, to protect American interests. And then the last minute or two is him talking again about the importance of him, President Reagan at the time, not being blocked from using tariff powers. Look at the parallel to what's happening right now. The left and the progressives, the Democrats, are trying to convince the Supreme Court of the United States to block President Trump from using tariff powers. So then he sees this ad that's cherry-picked, edited, taken out of context, and he becomes furious, and rightly so, regardless of your views on the issue.
Right.
And the merits of Trump and trade and all these things. You've got to acknowledge, in fairness, that was dirty pool. So I think this is incompetence in the extreme. And unfortunately, Canadians are going to suffer because of this. It just blows my mind. 75% of the trade from Ontario is to the United States, over 400,000 jobs. Yeah. And Premier Ford and Carney are just engaging in such reckless economic behavior.
Yeah, and Ford, constitutionally, historically, by custom, would not be leading the charge, would not be the lead spokesman, would not be the point man for an international negotiation. He's a provincial premier. He's obviously doing this with Carney's approval. Now, Carney said call it off, so he's calling it off in a couple of days. But it's sort of crazy. Like, why? What next? The mayor of Toronto or the mayor of Vancouver running attack ads in the States? It's just such...
But Ezra, wait a minute. It's not that they're calling it off. Well, how is it 75 million?
Right.
It's because they bought a whole bunch of time for the World Series ads.
Oh my gosh, I did. Oh,
and
I couldn't.
And so they're still going to.
Yeah, go ahead.
They're still going to run it over the World Series.
Oh, right.
Trump's going to see that.
Oh my God!
Is this
what I was thinking? How do you 75 million? I've never heard of an ad buy that large. It's 7.5 times what the NRA spent in the last presidential election. Elon Musk's enormous gift of $100 million, it's almost as big as that, and that helped change the election. This is so, I can imagine Trump is saying, who's attacking me? That guy who threatened to turn off electricity? That guy? Like, I can imagine why he blew a circuit.
But Ezra, if I just could, one important detail here.
Yeah.
Trump knows now, as of a few hours ago, with Premier Ford's announcement in the afternoon of the Friday, that he's going to continue to run in the ads until Monday.
Right.
He knows that he's going to run them at the Super Bowl.
Right.
Is Trump going to sit there and do nothing?
Right.
I guess we're going to find out. It wouldn't
Holy
surprise
smokes.
me if he says, no, you're not, pal. You're stopping those ads now.
Wow.
So what are his options? I don't know. I'm starting to think about that. But I don't think this is over by any stretch. And if Trump was angry yesterday, he's going to be even more angry, I would suspect, as will his supporters in the United States, as will his cabinet, as will his trade negotiators, if Doug Ford and Mark Carney continue to insult and offend and antagonize by running these outrageously misleading ads, knowingly misleading. That was a conscious decision to edit them the way they did,
right,
and run them during the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Wow. Well, you know what Doug Ford has done is he's got himself on American TV. And, so many different Canadians look down to the States as the big leagues. And it's true. I mean, we're 1/10 the size. And whether it's in sports or in music, or comedy or business, they are the big time, right? And so you have all these politicians who are the premiers of their provinces, but they know the big game is down south. And so even as Doug Ford realizes he's messed up a little bit, Wob Kinew, the premier of Manitoba, made sort of a copycat video, and we'll just play it. We won't play it with the sound up, but I just want to show you. Like, most Canadians don't know who Wob Kinew is, and I actually don't think he's that terrible. I mean, he's a socialist, but he's actually, I think, his expectations were so low, he's done better than that. But this is how he's going to be famous. This is how he's going to get an invitation on CNN. And David Eby, the Premier of British Columbia, here, let me read to you Eby's tweet. Like, after this entire meltdown, he says, Americans need to hear how tariffs raise prices. We're making ads to defend British Columbia and Canada's forestry workers. Our wood faces higher U.S. tariffs than Russia. Absurd. Truth will win. Okay, now, I'm not saying any of those facts are inaccurate. And I don't know. I mean, if we pay higher tariffs than Russia, that is absurd. But to double down on attack ads in the United States after Trump's reaction, I think Eby and Wob Kinew just want to be internet famous. They want to be the toast of the town on CNN. They want to maybe get invited on Jimmy Kimmel's show or something. They are certainly not going to help the industries they claim to be rooting for.
They've lost the plot. They're exploiting the Trump derangement syndrome with their base. They've lost the plot in that they've realized what they're playing with, what they've put into peril, is average Canadians' jobs.
Yeah.
their ability to provide for their families, that this is about trade, and trade is about meeting the needs of a customer and being responsive to the needs of a customer. It's not about screaming at them. It's not about threatening them. It's not about antagonizing them. Who could run a successful business when they become fixated on punishing and antagonizing and fighting with their customer?
Yeah.
So they've lost the plot, and unfortunately, it will be Canadians that suffer. And this is a huge incentive for Alberta separatists.
Yeah. Speaking of Alberta here, let me read the tweet put out today by Danielle Smith. And I say again, I saw her, and she was not obsequious. She was friendly and complimentary, and she is the most conservative of the Canadian premiers, so that was genuine. Let me read what she said. She said, I remain convinced that the path to a positive resolution with our U.S. partners lies in strong, consistent diplomacy and a commitment to working in good faith towards shared priorities such as North American energy dominance. To that end, I'm pleased to see Ontario's ad campaign is being suspended, as you point out, not till the damage is done. And I once again urge the federal government to continue negotiating to resolve these tariff issues and restore a free and fair trade agreement with the United States while diversifying and strengthening the Canadian economy by unleashing our world-class natural resource sector. So that was a tweet. And of course, the answer to strengthening Canada's economy is say yes to the pipelines. I mean, you would immediately have tens of billions of dollars of construction jobs, and you would have behind that tens of billions, maybe hundreds of billions over time, more oil and gas jobs. But Mark Carney's ideology is against that. You know, it's crazy that they were saying that she was the disloyal one. She was the one that would wreck everything. She's the only one who has had the common sense here. And I don't know, it's sort of crazy that these rogue premiers are what's up in Donald Trump's grill. I bet that there are some professional civil servants at our embassy in Washington and in, you know, Fort Pearson, as they call it, Pearson Bunker in Ottawa, who are thinking, what are these freelancers, what are these kamikaze pilots doing? They're wrecking everything. I've got to think there's a lot of professional diplomats who are pulling out their hair right now.
Well, and it's pretty clear from the leadership that we're seeing from Premier Smith here in Alberta that she appears to be the only adult in the room at the Premier's table.
Yeah.
Like this, when you compare the rhetoric and the screaming and the crybaby behavior of Ford and Eby and Wab Kinew and compare it to the mature, reasoned, calm, diplomatic tone of recognizing the United States as the most important customer that Canada has and will ever have. You know, we're geographically advantaged. We've seen over the last several months how countries around the world have come to meet with the Americans, with President Trump in the Oval Office to try and get increased access to that market. And we are better positioned than anyone else, but maybe for Mexico. And these guys are blowing it, and it's Canadians and our children that are going to suffer. We're going to see the direct result of this is going to be inflation. It's going to be increasing job losses, lower standard of living, gutting out the middle class. It's just spectacular that we have such poor leadership in Canada. And that's why so many Canadians want off, or Albertans rather, so many Albertans want off the bus. Yeah. We don't need these idiots.
Let me throw one last thing at you, and I said this in my monologue. Mark Carney presented himself as a man who knew how the world works. That's what he said. And he always wore a suit, and he looked the part, and he was the former head of the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada, and like he had a great-looking resume. And he was the chairman of Brookfield Asset Management, which is huge. It has $1 trillion under management. But he was the chairman, not the CEO. So he was the guy who would preside over meetings and be high level, more like a mascot than a roll up the sleeves guy. Like he was not, in fact, he traveled around going to conferences. He was at the World Economic Forum. He worked for the UN. Like I'm not going to say it was just a ceremonial job, but it was a largely ceremonial job. I don't think he knows how to actually do anything. He was an analyst at Goldman Sachs. If you could tell me what the Bank of Canada, Bank of England does, then you're ahead of me. Like he was just a resume guy, a CV guy, a guy who was wafted up higher and higher. I mean, he's the kind of guy who would hang out with Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's girlfriend. I mean, he was in those elite circles. But does he actually know anything? Has he actually done anything? I put it to you that an average corner store, convenience store operator knows more how to solve problems and deal with things than Mr. Jet Set. And I think he's had more than 200 days as prime minister, and he has no bloody clue. He has no idea on what to do. If you listen to him, it's all word salad. He does not know what to do. What do you think of that?
Well, I've been watching him carefully, both prior to him becoming prime minister and since. And what's become clear is that he's a good-looking empty suit. And not only that, so he's book smart, but he's not street smart. But there's two aspects to this. One is, let's look at Brookfield. Brookfield, and you just mentioned the guy at the corner store. Yeah. And that guy at the corner store used to be a hair salon, yeah, or a barber shop or a tax accounting office. And he had to remodel it, and he had to stock it, yeah, and he had to figure out how to advertise it, and he had to figure out how to build a market and a customer base, yeah, and balance a book and manage employees. That's not what Brookfield does. Yeah. Brookfield goes in, other people do that heavy lift. Some guy builds an oil field service company or an oil and gas company or some kind of manufacturing company or builds a residential real estate company. And then Brookfield, essentially a hedge fund, comes in and buys it up, right, and then carves it up, right, and squeezes it out and sells, right, off pieces. Right. Right. So that's to the extent he has experience beyond being a mystical banker, right, that's it. So he, right, doesn't know, right, how to build a company from scratch. Right. He doesn't know how to actually build a customer base and get access to markets. And this is painfully obvious, right, when he says we're going to increase our steel sales to, we're not going to sell steel to the United States anymore. We're going to ship it all the way across the world to Europe. Well, Europe already has steel suppliers. They're not going to say, oh, no way, Canada, you want it? Oh, sure, no problem. We'll stop selling. We'll shut our plants down. We'll lay all our workers off. Canada, come on in, take our market share. No way. Not only that, 75% of the steel in Europe comes from Europe. The 25% that doesn't comes from China, Russia, Turkey, that have far lower environmental standards. Yeah. They're not worrying about decarbonizing their steel. Yeah. They're not paying that. They have non-union low wages, and they don't have the shipping costs. So this guy has demonstrated he doesn't know what he's doing. If he were serious at all, if he were nothing more than a good-looking empty suit, he would not be on a plane right now to Asia. He would be in Ottawa. He would be drafting bills to repeal the emissions cap, which is a production cap to incentivize investment of all kinds of things, including in our electricity grid that are soon going to be failing. He would be repealing the tanker ban. He would be repealing the no more projects, no more pipelines bill so that people and investors could invest and build projects and build mines and build forestry projects, pulp mills, oil and gas activities, manufacturing facilities, smelters, and so on. He would be repealing all of these laws that are blocking development, investment, causing capital flight, causing job loss, and preventing growth in our economy.
Yeah. You know, you're so right about Brookfield being about vulture funds in a way, buying other people's work. I saw a little bit of that. I don't know if you remember, I went to the Isle of Man and then I went to Bermuda, not as vacations, but to try and track down these shell corporations. If I had to tell you what Mark Carney's specialties were, I would say climate mumbo jumbo and evading taxes, including personally, by the way. I'm sure that's why he had an Irish passport.
He loves the word catalyze.
Yeah.
To catalyze.
And
you know, when he starts talking about economics, break it down. It says nothing.
Oh, he's got this list of buzzwords: generational investment, catalyze, transform. It's like Justin Trudeau, but with 10 new words. If you took those words out of any given speech of his, there would be nothing left.
Correct.
Keith Wilson, King's Counsel, great to catch up with you. Thanks for your time today.
Good to see you, Ezra.
All right, you too. Stay with us. Your letters to me next.